All right, folks. Hold on. Hold your horses, and I feel I feel like that's quite a fitting phrase for. I have a mustache right now, and I feel like kind of traditional old West United States of America. Hold your horses. Anyway, I also love how casual In the Image Clothing Company is, which is what this is. In the Image Clothing Company podcast. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of this company as a whole. And today is, surprisingly to me, actually the 24th of January, 2025. I thought it was the 26th, and it is not. And I'm going to explain that a little bit. But yeah, this is the podcast, and we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. Within our company, we have 3 sides. The other 2 sides, the main company side of thing, is where we address the anatomy of the human body, and we allow the human body to work through mostly clothing because it's placed on us always and nothing else is. So it's actually the thing that causes pain within the human body, unless there's like something happened, like an injury. These persistent pain problems and patternings that people get into across the earth, they're universal, and it really is because of what we discuss here. So we are called In the Image Clothing Company because we're all universally designed in and through and by our living God, Jesus the Christ. So, in his image. Now, I really love how the past few episodes have been like this. I've had this like intro that I do, right? And not that it couldn't stay the same always, but the past few have been like almost seeming like it's my first time. And it's definitely not. This is episode 46 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Choose the Right. And it's more than what you might think, but it also is what you probably are thinking as well. So we're going to get into that. But the other third of our company is In the Image Clothing Company Music. And we discuss setups of instruments, positions of the human body when we play music, when we sing, and I make music there. It's really quite a cool place to check out if you'd like. So, yeah, what I'll do is run through where clothing needs to sit and how it needs to be on human bodies, no matter who you are, man, woman, any age, any part of the earth, any height, any amount of fat content or muscle mass, because it's about the skeletal system. It really is. The human body is about a natural position. The musculature just moves the foundation, which is the skeletal system, and the fat content just, different amounts of that happen at different times in our lives. And so, yeah, like within the gospel, it's about having a firm, solid, centered foundation. But within the gospel of Jesus Christ, he is who we center our foundation on. Within the human body, yes, it's the bones. So, for everybody, any part of the earth, any human being, any time ever as well, the pants that we wear need to be all the way up off of our hips. All the way off. The hips have just all their ranges of motion, rotations, and mobility in the legs. Choking up, and it was like, I felt like it was intentional. I don't know if I'm not saying something that I should be or something. But yes, keep that waistline of the pants all the way up above the hip bones and slightly higher in the front than in the rear. Just slight, but the core muscles, the muscles in the front of our stomach, right? Those muscles would always be activated. That's just the center of our body. That's how our body is stabilized from its center, working up and down. There would never be a time naturally that would be deactivated. But when there's something placed on it, and if the waistband of our pants is any angle besides what I discussed, we're going to just be fighting this external thing we've placed on us. And our cores, just the center of our body, won't be able to stay naturally working. And that travels through the rest of it. So there we go. Now the tops that we wear, the seams on top of our shoulders need to be behind and evenly behind these little bones that are up here, that little bone on the very top of the edges of your shoulders, because that's the other end of our collarbones. And what that does is allow the shoulders to sit in their natural/neutral, which are synonyms within the human body, position, okay? Which they naturally are actually behind the human body. The shoulder blades, that really is like the main bone of the shoulder, as far as you know, the upper arm bone, the humerus, it'll go up into that shoulder socket. And you've got that ball and socket joint and it moves. And that is why also the edge seams of our shoulders need to be right at the very edges. Because, yeah, that's where it like hinges and rotates in that socket. But, right, it'll do all the pivoting and everything that it does here. But the shoulder blade, those big bones on the top of your back, your upper back, like right behind your rib cage, those bones, they naturally actually sit back there behind your rib cage. And so those bones are entirely determined by your shoulder seams. Entirely. So that's why they need to be even as well, because what you'll see so often is people's right scapula, that bone on the back of their upper back, will be like kind of elevated and off the rib cage like this, and the left one will be in a pretty normal location as far as like just how the body naturally connects, because it only does things that it does in one way. And so you'll see this, like my right hand, if you're just listening in audio only, you're not really missing out, you can visualize it. But this podcast, in the Image Clothing Company podcast, is available in both video and audio, as well as just audio only. So that right scapula a lot of times will be like up off of the rib cage like this, and kind of like, not back there where it should be, closer to the spine and like more flat against the back, as if you're laying on the ground on your back and there's just flat. And that you can notice that you'll lay on the ground if you are in this patterning, which most everybody is to a degree. Some people it's quite a great degree. That right scapula, the right shoulder blade, if you don't know what the word scapula means, those are just the same thing. It is the same thing, worded two different ways. That bone kind of has a hard time laying against the rib cage. So if you lay on your back on the ground, you might notice it's uncomfortable on the rear of your right shoulder. And that's for a lot of reasons. Like the dreaded collar seam is the biggest reason, directly from what's going to be on the shoulders. This little seam right here, if you're looking at this in visual form. But if you're just listening, within t-shirts, there's that little seam that's up on the collar. I talk about it all the time. I've talked about it since before I founded the company, but then yes, through the whole time we've had in the Image Clothing Company, that's been one of the main things, because it is one of the biggest things that's causing imbalances in human bodies across the whole globe. And it's so small that it gets overlooked. I mean, almost everything in clothing really gets overlooked because we don't know to even look for imbalances in our clothing for most of us. I was that way. But a seam that small, a lot of times we don't even have any idea that it's there. And that's one of the biggest things that's actually causing that right shoulder to be in such a poor position. So, wow, cool, yeah. I just don't say that within the intros, but I almost always mention shoulder seams within intros, so I'm glad that I had that little bit of like deeper explanation of that, because I've definitely mentioned that collar seam a lot. I quote unquote coined the term the dreaded collar seam just because it's doing so much damage, and it's something we can do something about. We have our modification, and as we call it, the dreaded collar seam modification, under In the Image Clothing Company. So, wow. I just didn't plan on talking about that right now within the intro of this, but I think it's because of what the title of this episode of the podcast is, In the Image Clothing Company Podcast. I think that's why, because I didn't plan it, but I was like, it just kind of came through me. So, yeah, we'll talk a little bit about what the right side of the body is doing within this. This is going to be really sweet. I mean, I knew it was going to be sweet, but it's like, I don't know. I love the unconventionality of it. If that's not a dictionary word in the English language, then cool. But I like that word as well, because of the fact that it is quite unconventional to say it that way. So yeah, that's where our clothing needs to sit on our bodies, just because that's where the skeletal system does its thing. And that's what I was discussing with what that scapula ends up doing, just because of some little seam that is so common and has been for decades, at least. I don't know how long for sure as of right now, but I do know at least multiple decades. So, in the Image Clothing Company, in addition to just having clothing sit where the body's going to work, we also have two prerequisites that we say that we got to do just because these things go along with what we're doing when it comes to wearing clothing as human beings. And the first one is our shoelacing technique. It's just the only technique that actually causes the lacing to shape like a human foot. And so both sides of the feet then will just be able to have their natural shape and be unaltered. And with the technique, we tie our shoes evenly over toward the inside, toward the center of the body, which is the spine. There is a center to the human being, and there's a foot on each side of that. So that's the first prerequisite, is those two things paired. And then we also remove all tags from inside clothing, all of them. Well, from outside clothing, I would say as well, but the intention is the ones inside because they're causing gaps where they're placed and they're just changing the position of the body. And they're also made out of just a material that the body's trying to like reject, and it just can't because it's, between the clothing and the skin. So that does include within the shoes as well, because either the ankle's ability to flex, dorsiflex or plantar flex, will be affected, or those gripped arches within the feet that really correlate with the open palm of our hands, right? Those things in the feet can be very, very much affected. Ankle function, traveling up the whole body, if there's tags within the shoes. So, yeah, there we go. This is so awesome. I mean that in like the most unexpected way, because I knew what this title was going to be, and I got like an idea of what we're going to talk about, but I love how it's going so far so much. So here's the thing: choosing the right. Within the gospel of Jesus Christ, we have that term, and we say that, right? Choose the right. Don't do the wrong thing, in a sense. Now, here's a thing to be very clear about, and I mention this all the time. We are sinful by nature human beings. We mess up, and we will always. We're supposed to. That's what a human being is somebody who's, something that is conditional, so that it has to rely on an unconditionally perfect God. And we do. And that's who and what he is. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the truth of all things. Don't believe me, but it is, right? Don't believe me on anything, I say that, right? But I'm just trying to speak on truth that applies to everybody, right? Messing up as I do it, as I say, right? So here's the thing with choosing the right is we're going to make mistakes. But really within the gospel, what we mean by choose the right is try to do the good thing. Try to do the right thing. Try to do the thing that is hard to do sometimes, like take the high road, if you will, right? Not to be seen that like as the person taking the high road, but as far as being kind when it's hard, you hear that term, kill them with kindness, right? That's what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, is to try always to look to our perfect God and emulate him in all that we can do. And we're never going to do that perfectly within this life, but choosing the right thing to do, even if we're wrong about it, but just, meaning sometimes we will be. Sometimes we're doing things and it's like we thought this was going to be the best approach, but actually wasn't quite the right choice of the right thing to do. The point is to try, right? Try to do the right thing in every case. Sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes we entirely intentionally oppose the right thing because we're upset, because we're trying to be right rather than just do the right thing. But yeah, we talk about within the gospel that phrase, choose the right. Now, we'll discuss more of the gospel and how that looks as we do throughout this episode. But what I'm going to focus on is clothing and the body and imbalances and patternings within the body's system as a whole. It's just structural, mechanical workings. The body's just a mechanical machine. And as well as a machine in the other ways, all the functions that the body has are just functions. It's like creating something as a human being, like making like a science project to do like a certain type of function, like a robot. That's what the body does. But we're much more than just like a robot. But that's really how we can look at it. That's why I say it that way. It's just an operable thing, right? It's got levers to it, like the ankle and the wrist and the elbow and the knee, hinges, and it has rotations, and it just has parts to it that do certain things, as if, like I'm saying, as if we were to build something to like perform a function. Well, our God, quote unquote, built our bodies to be able to function. That's what the human body is. It's just a machine. It really is that simple. And that's why I always say, like, we're never going to get our bodies to do anything. The goal is natural. The key word is always allow the body to work, because we can't get this thing that we didn't design to do something that we want. We're only going to just learn how it works and get it to do that if it has been restricted, right? Just stop the restriction. Simplify, minimize, allow. Actually, I think I say minimize, simplify, allow. Minimize, simplify, allow. I don't know which order I say those three in, or it doesn't really matter necessarily. But yeah, I say those three words a lot within the company because that's how it is. So, yeah, in order to do that and stop the restriction, clothing just needs to fit. And that's why I always am so bold about, if you ever purchase In The Image Clothing Company clothing, do all that you can to just get it in your size. Do not ever purchase In The Image Clothing Company clothing oversized, or else you're imbalancing your body because it's going to fall to your dominant side and pull you out of your center line. It just will. The shoulder seams will be wider than your shoulders, and they're not going to just fall so perfectly evenly too large on each side. And even that in itself, it's an imbalance in a vertical way, because your shoulders naturally sit at a certain level where the muscles have the amount of contraction that they do to allow the bones to be in their natural position, like the collarbones, right? So yeah, okay, that's cool. This shoot, dude, I love this episode. Here's the thing. We are going to have more things to need to focus on when there are imbalances within the human body on the right side than on the left, because of designs, because of just how it is, because of how the world is structured around right-handedness, because the vast majority of human beings are. So yeah, I mean, even like a pair of scissors, right? There's right-handed and left-handed scissors. I play guitar. There's right-handed versus left-handed guitars. So things like that really we build in a way that gears toward using one side of the body in one way versus the other one. It's geared toward right-handed people. And so within that being the case, there's something to unpack in that alone, because not only are things geared toward one side, so even if you're left-handed, you're still going to be within right-handed patternings. You still... There was more that I was going to say with that, but maybe I don't really need to right now. What I am going to say, though, is we really do usually use one side of our body more than the other, right? Like, I use my right hand for so much more than I use my left hand for, and that's the case for most people, just statistically. But we still have a spine that's in the center, and so we can't be imbalanced without pain. That's just it, right? You get like a robot that you build and you put, like, let's say the robot's like 10 pounds, right? However many kilograms that is, right? I mean, let's just say 10 pounds. And then like 6 of the pounds are on one half of it from its center, and 4 of the pounds are on the other half of it. So that equals 10, but it's just not evenly from the center. That thing is just not going to operate properly. It's going to be like falling over, or you're going to have to do something to have like a compensated weight added to a side, or like, right? That's how the human body is. So no matter what, we still have to do all that we can to stay centered because we have one. The nose as well, right? The nose, the sternum, even like our throat, this tube that is called the trachea, where food goes through and we breathe and it goes through the center of our neck. We still have to be as centered as we can within our own situations, even though we might be doing the vast majority of things with one hand versus the other. And because of that, I was actually over at the church tonight and I was looking at paintings, like biblical times, like the times when Christ was on the earth. And I was looking at paintings of him and people that he was like ministering to. And these paintings are more recent than, these paintings weren't actually painted 2,000 years ago, as far as I'm aware. But the depiction of them still is how it would be, no matter what time it is. That's what I say. It could be any time period. We're still going to wear clothing as human beings for protection and for all the reasons that we do, staying modest. And if it's oversized, it's going to do the same thing, whether it's thousands of years back or thousands of years anywhere, just meaning anytime ever. So the point that I'm hitting on with that is that I was looking at the patternings that they depict within the paintings of people from this time period. So regardless of what the painter had their perception of being with painting the imbalances in, they still did, right? Meaning it would have been that way, but then not only that, but just a painter knows the imbalances. Like, we know these things without maybe really thinking about it very often. And that's what I always discuss, is the patterning. It's like the universal patterning. And I did a series for the main company side of In the Image Clothing Company that I titled Universal Patterning Series, because that's how it is, right? The right side, I was going to say shoulder, but the whole body, the whole right side of it will just be lower than the left. And so that also means almost always, in almost every sense of what that is, external more than internal. Internal is like coming to the center of you. It's like coming toward your spine. External is the opposite. It's going away from yourself, right? Your hands rotating out, that's external. Your feet pointing out, that's external. Your hands, like if you follow your thumbs, when they rotate in toward you, that's internal. And when the feet come in, that's internal. And then from your hands, it travels to your shoulders. From your feet, it travels to your hips. And then that's your spine, right? Your shoulders and your hips are both connected to your spine. And the spine just does what the hips and shoulders do. There you go. That's the human body. That's how simple it really is. Seriously. And, there's more that we discuss, but that's just how it functions. That's it. Really. Right? Because we got the waistline of the pants, allowing the pelvis to be in a good position, just a neutral posterior rather than excessively anterior. And the shoulder seams just keep the shoulders in their good position. And if you're watching in visual form as well as audio, then look, when I retract my shoulders, my arms rotate inward. That's how it works, right? And so that's why that right hand is so much more external almost always, because like I was discussing at the beginning, that right shoulder blade is off of the back and it should be retracted, which turns the hand in. The body's that simple, right? When you can see it as a whole, and when we can look at it we start from the spine, but not for the sake of addressing anything with the spine. We just start at the center, and that's the spine, because it just is. That's where the nervous system stems from. That's what holds our head up, and our head has to stay in the center as well. And yeah, everything comes out from the spine because it's the center. Everything has to be looked at and approached from a center line because there is one. So it's just something that doesn't happen when people are trying to help the body work, mostly because almost everybody ties their shoes unevenly. So their whole body's in a twist to begin with. And then you'll go into a clinic and they'll try to address it from some part of it. I talk about how I've got a problem with specialists for those reasons. You're trying to address the hand because there's a problem, but it's not the hand, it's your right foot. If it's your right hand that's having pain. But you start to tie that right shoe evenly with the left one so that's going to the center, right? But then you have to go from there. Now your knee needs to be able to work correct, and your hip, and then your shoulder can, because your hip from the foot to the knee to the hip will travel through your spine to your shoulder, and then you can address the hand. Otherwise, you can't. You address the hand all you want, but if your foot's pulled out of alignment, your hand's going to just continue with the same problem that it's experiencing. It's just a symptom. It's not the problem. That's just how the body is. Okay, so, I mean, really. And it's cool because it's simple. That's the whole thing. In the Image Clothing Company, I made a video about a week ago titled, "In the Image Clothing Company keeps the human body simple." Because that's all we gotta do is just keep it centered, right? Even if you're missing part, even if whatever, right? But just in all that we can do in our own situations. So, yeah, the whole right side of the body, that's what I mean. That's choose the right. When you're having problems within the body, pain that you're experiencing, or yeah, that's really what it is. But physical function type of problems like that, address the right side of the body. Because it's the side that's just so inhibited, even if it's not something you've done. But as I mentioned, with like just things in life being built and quote unquote catered to right-handed people and operations of use, so is clothing. So yeah, and we discussed that. I mean, there's so much I talk about within that, and there's so many modifications that I show because, as I say, it's not about sales. Cool, yeah, if you want to buy our clothing, do it because it's going to be good. But I also just show all the modifications that I can that would need to be done within clothing to just allow it to stay centered so that that right side is not so inhibited. And you can get that right side even with the left as far as the height. That right upper trap, which is that muscle that connects the base of the skull in the back to the shoulder, and it adheres along the spine on the neck. It's called the cervical spine. It's just the section of the spine that's your neck. That upper trap just needs to get up, and then your head can be even. And then, you know, the right shoe is the one that's always being tied external if you're right-handed. Yeah, even left-handed people might be, just because it goes along with the same patternings of other things. Because this is a thing, is I've thought about this a lot. Like, I'm so shocked that there are left-handed people. But that's the reason that people are right-handed, by the way. If you wonder, or if people are doing studies trying to figure out, I have the answer for you, and you don't have to believe me, but it's just the truth. The reason people are right-handed, mostly, is because of clothing imbalances. And that has to be like seen as it is, because obviously if things are being built in ways that are geared toward right-handedness, then you're going to use that side more, and then by using that side more, it's going to get more muscle to it, which will just actually inhibit the body more, the muscle mass. I talk about that because we don't want more muscle mass than we need, meaning size-wise, because it's actually inhibiting the body. You don't have to have a certain amount of visual, physical size of muscle to be really, really, really strong, because, yeah, it's about efficiency. The human body is about efficiency. It's like using a pulley system and a small, thin little steel cable, rather than using like one thick rope and a lot of people to pull on something. If you're just trying to pull something with a rope, like a big heavy rock, and you've got like 4 or 5 people trying to pull this thick rope to move this rock, you can do the same amount of work and the same amount of things can be accomplished if you put like a pulley system where you have a smaller rope and it's going around pulleys, which like are little like wheels that, you know, comes kind of around like a belt would go on a car, you know, like around pulleys. Because I don't really know exactly like how to explain scientifically how that works, but somehow that helps it. You know, you can do the same amount of effort with just one person through those pulleys that you could do with like 4 or 5 people with just one rope. So that's how the human body is, meaning you get excessive muscle mass within the right side of the body because it's being used more. That will actually inhibit its like dexterity, like within the hand. And I've shown this, usually the right side of people's hands, and you can see it again if you're watching this in the visual form, you can see it on my hand. My right hand here is actually wider than my left, and I've been addressing that a lot. A lot of it's to do with the pinky. I've got a video, 2 of them, for In the Image Clothing Company, titled "The Pinky Finger Affects the Entire Body," because it does. It's the neutral wrist. Straight out from the forearm is that pinky, and since the right arm's so inhibited, that pinky is getting used and worked out of such an imbalanced position that follows with the shoulder and then the foot and the rotations on the whole right side of the body. The pelvis comes kind of like forward and to the left, actually, because that's what would rotate the right side external. So yeah, all that's happening. And since the right side of the body is being used in such an inefficient way, it has more muscle mass. And so that's people at the gym. They'll be like, this is so cool, dude. This is In the Image Clothing Company. This is real. This is eternal. This is every human to ever live will be in this patterning because of the things that we talk about. This is not about sales, but about truth. This is In the Image Clothing Company. This is real. People will have what they call like a power leg or like a strong side of their body. And it's the side usually that has larger muscle to it. It's actually the side that is weaker. It's in a mechanically unable to function naturally position. And so it has more mass to it to compensate. Like that rope and pulley scenario. You've got more people to compensate for the inefficiency of just one rope versus the pulley system and just one person. That's how the human body works. There you go. I am so in love with this episode of the podcast, dude. In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Episode 46, Choose the Right. This is awesome. This is what I mean. Eternal, universal, across the globe. This is how it always will be. It doesn't matter how clothing designs look, the human body. Because that's the point. It is about clothing because clothing reinforces and gets us to stay within these patternings. But even with no clothing, we'd still be in a quote-unquote right-handed patterning. Right? But then if your right shoulder drops, now so does the thing that's placed on your body. And it just keeps you in that position. Right? So, dude, this is so cool. It doesn't get more real than this. And there's no kind of thing I'm trying to claim or push, or that's why I say don't believe me, because you don't have to. I'm just talking about what's happening that we can look around and see, and you can look at your own body and see. All right? Don't believe me because you don't need to. Just listen to me explain things that you have questions about and you can understand once I explain them. That's all that this is. That's what In the Image Clothing Company is, and I love this. So, this is awesome. And that's why I say that whole phrase where I'm going to say it again how I say it, because I don't mean it for any kind of pride on my part, but I've been prompted to be saying this, that I don't know if there's another person on the planet. And that's, it's like, how could that be? There's so many people, but I really keep getting prompted to say that knows quite the extent of what clothing is doing to the human body as me, little old Evan Strong. I don't care if that's the case or not, but I just keep getting prompted to say it. So, right, we'll see what happens. Like I said, today's the 24th of January, 2025. I don't know. I think it's kind of a documentation thing. So it's like seeing how this all came to be. I don't know. It's not about me, but I feel very strongly to say that when I do say it. So there we go. Now, yeah. Because what'll happen is when you're tying your right shoe away from your center line, which is what's happening, right? In a right-handed knot, we need to be tying evenly toward the inside, right? Over toward the inside, evenly on both feet to the center. When that right side's being tied away from yourself, it'll rotate your sock. And so now, like let's say you wear shoes all day with your shoes tied like that, just so poorly imbalanced. When you take your shoes off and go to bed, let's say you sleep in your socks. Or maybe you haven't gone to bed yet, but you just take your shoes off when you come into a house or a building, and you just have socks on for a few hours that were within those shoes that got rotated imbalanced. And now the musculature of your leg and just it's having also a pull on your foot and ankle as well. It's not just the rope of the shoelace, but it carries over, right? And not only the sock, but even the skin on the lower leg that got affected by just the workings of the muscles, right? Because the musculature adheres in the ways that it does to the skin, just meaning like, the body's all working together inside of the skin. And so the skin will grow or stretch in like a little bit of an imbalance and a twist. But then, yeah, I mean, it gets this deep. This is how real it is. And so there you go. I mean, I could discuss that as deep as it could be, but we'll talk about it as we do and stuff. But so yeah, right. That's just the sock alone is still pulling on you. Cause yeah, like I started to say, then if you sleep in those socks that you wore that day, I mean, some people probably think that's gross. Some people might wear the same socks for like 2 weeks in a row. I mean, there's people just that have got their views on what they think is like gross or healthy or hygienic or whatever, right? I get that, but yeah, I mean, some people definitely just sleep in the socks they wore inside their shoes all day, and if you don't adjust them to like get them nice and even once you've taken off your shoes, then your sock is still holding you into a twist that really was like coming mostly from the shoelace that the sock was inside the shoe for the duration of the day. So this is how big it really gets. So yeah, the whole thing about choose the right within the body is it's almost always the right side of the body that we're going to be addressing. Um, it just is because it's the side that's inhibited, and it's almost always a release that needs to happen. Scar tissue and bound up muscles and skin, really allowing skin to stretch, like the elbow, right? I mean, if you can't fully, because it's mine's actually getting very, very close. It might be pretty well like there, but it's really uncommon for people to be able to evenly bend their elbows to full bend. I don't know what word I'm going to use besides that. But with your shoulder blades actually sitting evenly on your back and the shoulders at even height, right? It's so uncommon for people to actually have full range of motion is what I'm saying, but I don't know what word to use right now when it's like all the way closed. But I did do a video for the main site of In the Image Clothing Company titled How Clothing Affects full range of motion. Oh no, it was titled How Clothing Affects Joint Extension. And so that's the thing is, yeah, it's also fully extending that right arm, but again, with it at a proper position, the shoulder blade in a good position and the shoulder height, right? Watching that collarbone angle and just even, right? So that's what I mean is it's almost always something we have to do to allow motion to happen. It's not a strengthening because that's the whole point is the right side almost always has more muscle, and that's something that's actually aiding, but in a negative quote unquote way, like restriction in the body. Because, right, you have the whole thing about not being able to close your elbow all the way is if you have excess muscle mass here in the crease of your elbow, then you can't even close your elbow, right? But you might think like, well, yeah, but I've got such a good amount of muscle over here. Well, yeah, but your right arm has so much more muscle size that it doesn't have natural function, right? Like you're closing your arm and you hit the muscle rather than going all the way to the closed position of the joint. So now there's compensation that's happening that travels through the rest of the body because that full range of motion that's designed by our God to be there is inhibited by something you've done by intentionally growing more muscle there, but really it's usually in addition to just the fact that it's so poorly positioned because of imbalances that it can't work normally anyway. Because if your shoulder's not at a proper height, even with the left one, as far as high as, then you can't bend your elbow all the way because it's just not going to work. But the reason really is, in addition to just like the position it's in, just isn't quite how it works. There's just going to be more muscle there, right? So, yeah. I mean, it's this kind of stuff that don't believe me, right? But this is happening, and for the reasons that we discuss here. So, there we go. The right side of the body. It's always the right side. I mean, it's like 99% of the time. I really, it's because, yeah, because of all the reasons that it is, and I can get into it, but we talk about that stuff more on the main side of the company. So, because the podcast is about the gospel of Jesus Christ, but as I say, it's the truth of all things. So anything we're talking about that's just real is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So this is. So, yeah, the right side of the body. The right side of the body. And yeah, right? Choose the right. You've got a problem within any part of your body, even if you're experiencing pain on the left, it's probably just because it's compensating for such an unable to work right side, right? So, yeah, that's really how it almost always is within the human body. So there we go. Choosing the right. We need to just, in everything that we do, understand that, man, well, because here's the thing. Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying something different than I started saying there. This is the whole thing. Within the gospel, right? Within choosing the right thing to do, what happens so often is, like I'm saying, if you have pain in the left side of your body, it's just about every single time the right side's inability to work that's causing pain on the left because it's trying to compensate, because there's still a center. Within the gospel, if we are, how am I going to approach this to word it in a way that like goes, yeah, I mean, it's going to be good, but I don't know how to word it right now. Because if we're trying to do, darn, this is really cool, and I just don't know how to put it into words as of yet. Well, here's the thing, right? With the right side of the body, we don't have to address it, like do things to it. We have to stop the restriction of the right side, and then it will just work, right? The key word is allow the body to work. So within the gospel, we can be doing some really, really good things in our lives, but also have some pretty not good things that we know are not good that we're still doing. And we're not going to like fix the way we feel about those not so good things that we're aware of by doing more good things while still continuing to do the not good things, because that's like what I was discussing with the body. The whole point is we have to stop doing everything that we know that we shouldn't be. It's not about doing more. It's just about trying to do less of things that we've known for maybe quite some time even that we shouldn't be doing in the first place. So I guess kind of putting that into words of relating it directly with what I was saying with the body is like the workouts. We don't have to work out to get the right side of the body to feel better, because that's actually going to just, oh, this is going to be so cool because it's just real. It's actually going to I said that twice, hurt you worse because of what I was saying with building more excess muscle mass, when that's one of the big reasons the right side of the body's restricted, is because that's already there, because it's compensating. This is crazy. Within life, right, we're doing some really good things. And so instead of stopping the things we shouldn't do, right? Within our lives, which is the same as stopping the restriction within the right side of our bodies. What we need to do is the other end. Well, no, that's the end we need to do. I'm not upset about it. I just wanted to word it so it wasn't confusing to hear. Because what we'll do a lot of the time is try to do more good things when we're already doing them. But we won't stop the other ones. And we're trying to compensate and like counterbalance, right? And like make up for the bad things we know we're already doing, but we just don't really want to give up and stop doing. The president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had a talk. His name's Russell M. Nelson. And he said, I don't know exactly, I'm not going to quote him word for word, but he was saying like we need to do all that we can to do all that we know we need to do, even if that means giving up our most favorite sins. And he worded it very similar to that. So that's what I mean. We'll have good things we're doing, but if we're not willing to let go of those other things, then doing more good things isn't going to make us feel better. We're not going to be able to compensate that thing that we can't quite feel like we can get rid of at this time that we know we should get rid of. That's not going to happen. Okay? That's what I'm saying. It's about getting rid of the things we don't need. Getting rid of the restriction within the human body, getting rid of the scar tissue and the bound up muscles, and it just takes your own hands. That's all I've used as the founder of In the Image Clothing Company with my own body. You know, like the outside of this right forearm is a huge thing because that neutral wrist is from the pinky up the forearm, and because that neutral wrist is not there on the right side in almost everybody because of the patterning that we're in universally across the entirety of the earth at any time period, just because of how human beings operate, using the right side more generally. So, right, once we get rid of the things that we don't need, the bound up stuff within the body and those not so good things in our life, that is what will actually make us feel good. It's about doing less. And that's not the easy way out or whatever people are telling you that it is, or like whatever, right? I mean, we get told that as human beings a lot of the time by other people. Other equals to us will say like, you're just lazy, taking the easy way out, doing whatever. Like how I always mention, we need to work smarter, not harder, because working harder literally means doing more damage to yourself to perform the same task. Holy full circle, listen to this. You already are. When we talked about the rope, right? Working harder is using 4 people with 1 thick rope. Working smarter is you're getting the same job done just as thoroughly, but you're using a pulley system, a smaller rope, and 1 human being. There you go. Okay? How cool is this? That's all I'm going to say because I love it. I'm going to wrap this up. This is In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 46, titled Choose the Right. There we go. The gospel of Jesus Christ is the truth of all things. I do what I can to speak and preach the gospel in the most clear and straightforward way because I'm a very clear and straightforward human being, and we don't need to overcomplicate anything ever. There we go. We will have clothing available at... I'm going to say this. We still complicate stuff. We're sinful by nature. I do it, right? But we don't need to. Okay, here we go. We've got clothing available when we do. As of today's date, we don't. But it'll always be made out of 100% natural materials. It'll stay centered. It'll fit correct. Purchase it in your size. And it will allow the body to work. So check out the other 2/3 of our company if you'd like to. And yes, this is the 3rd time I've said this within this, but I'm going to. It is the 24th of January, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of this here company, In the Image Clothing Company. I'm really, really grateful myself for this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And thank you for listening to it. And I'm going to say this. It's not something I say that often, and there doesn't need to be an intentionality behind why I do or don't, and it's not a problem to or not. Just when I feel prompted to, share this if you want. Okay? This episode here, because this is one that I feel that I should be saying to share. So thank you.